Late last night, I had come upon something on YouTube, which was a discussion that tangentially spoke about Carl Jung's awful, deplorable racism and white supremacy. And I thought, I had, when I was much younger, in my mid-20s, I had a binge of Jung and found him very, very helpful and influential and very profound and helpful is the biggest word I can use. And I thought, I didn't run into that, but I could see maybe he was, maybe he seemed to be writing mostly about Northern Europeans, Germanic types. So I thought, well, I'm going to look this up. So I started looking it up. I spent about an hour trying to find quotes. I typed in, what did Carl Jung say about race? Well, I got no joy. All I got was people talking about what a shame it was or how terrible it was that Carl Jung was a racist. No direct quotes, no things that he actually said. And when there were things that he actually said, they were written by people proving that he was not racist. But I thought, well, that's not useful to me. Let me find the racist quote. So this morning I was watching I found a piece, Racism in Jungian Psychology, conversation with Christopher Carter and Dr. Michael Hayes, Dr. Christopher Carter, Dr. Michael Hayes, who had edited a book called Jungian Reflections on Systemic Racism with Polly Young Eisendrath. That's young as in young, not Jung. And the quote was, Jung quote, "Those Negroes are murderous devils who might kill other people as well as yourself. So why should they be free? They had far better be chained," end quote. That's the quote that Polly used to introduce this discussion about, and they were all three, she and the two doctors are Jungian psychologists. So they wanted to analysts. They wanted to discuss this unfortunate fact. Well, I thought, okay, I'll go and Google that quote. So I did. First off, it came up as from Malcolm X. So we've suddenly got that context. And he may have been quoting Jung, but I then added Jung into the search and finally found this long symposium that he did in 1932 that involved 4 or 5 other people, and they were discussing this a woman who was studying the Tao and Lao Tse. Lao Tse apparently means old man, and this woman had had a vision. And in this, she says, in the vision, she saw there, in the darkness of the hold, I saw many Negroes in chains. In their midst, an old man with a beard reading from a great book. At his feet lay a cat. This is her vision. And then they discussed the meaning of this vision. And so this is the medicine man. And Jung, Dr. Jung, and why does he chain up the Negroes? He chains up nature, the black men. But what does it mean that she comes upon these chained Negroes in the vision? Dr. Ott, they are repressed instincts. Dr. Jung, yes, she comes into the region of her own chained primitive tendencies. And the old man is also a primitive. Of course, the medicine man is a very primitive notion. Now, how is he connected with Tao? The medicine man is the person who transmits the truth. Okay, so we're dealing with a lot of symbolisms. We're dealing with some archetypes and things like that. And she keeps saying, well, why aren't the Negroes freed? Why doesn't the medicine man free the Negroes? Then the quote, Those Negroes are murderous devils who might kill other people, us as well as yourself. So why should they be free? They had far better be chained. End quote. In the metaphor, chain the intuitions, chain the instincts, chain nature. He chains up nature. So it's symbolic. He wasn't sitting at a Ku Klux Klan meeting making a speech, standing in front of a bunch of white-sheeted Southerners shouting, those Negroes are murderous devils who might kill other people as well as yourself, which is the context in which she quoted it. So it's like, wow, this, and then I thought, well, this is what many discussions end up being about today. Is you get a sliver of a piece of information, you make a presumption, the presumption is compounded by other people who want to agree with you, who want to read your books, you want to read their books, and you end up with a really serious misinterpretation of an extremely valuable philosophy of thought. There's a million things about Jung that I don't get, I don't understand, but he did. A premise that I understand is that he sought out the unartificial, the non-doctrinal, he sought the original sources of the human condition, based on the idea that if you access them, you could heal people. There's a very famous story of a young woman. He had a young peasant girl who was in the Basel or wherever it was, Zurich or wherever it was that he was practicing, and she was manifesting schizophrenia. And after speaking with her for a while, he said, oh, wait a minute. And he went out and he bought whatever the version of recorded records were in that day. He bought some music from the village that she was from, or the canton that she was from in rural Switzerland. And he played these records, and he didn't just play the records, he danced with her the folk dances of that region, and they sang the songs, and apparently she began to get better. It was a breakthrough. So it's that kind of thing. And so that the culture today hears the word primitive and they assume it is a derogatory term. So he refers to primitive nature, native instinct, instinctual. He's not referring to these things as backwards or inferior. They're the source of his healing powers. And it seems to me, from the little that and there are actually conversations he has with people, he does source many of today's psychological, or his days, mid-20th century, when, my God, they were about. And he came from an extremely repressed, typically European culture, Schweizdeutsch, Swiss German, very Anglo-Saxon, very very repressive of sexuality of any kind, of sensuality, of Dionysus, etc., etc. And as far as I can tell, he saw these societies that still are less sophisticated, less civilized, as blueprints of health. Some of this is my interpolation on what I got from him. Lawrence van der Post wrote a series of books who was a huge Jungian, wrote a series of books about the the Bushmen in Africa. So I would ask anybody who knows anything about the Bushmen in Africa. They're Stone Age. They live in the Stone Age. by choice. They have been, they've been exposed to cars and electric razors and the internet, no doubt, and they have remained in this, where they are, in the Kalahari Desert, which is a marginal place of existence. It's a fucking desert. And they're hunter-gatherers. So my argument would be, should I encounter these people, as much as I have encountered them in terms of documentaries and reading Van der Post, do I consider these people to be backward and less than my own civilization? I actually think exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. And I'm a fan of all the technology that surrounds me. But if I was put to it and said which is the superior civilization, I would say the Bushmen. I would say the Lakota. I would say, which was also an interesting, true, Jung came over to the States 6 times, I believe, in the early 20th century. And his theories on the Americans are, of course, completely unorthodox. And he said that, as far as he could tell, the white man in America was heavily influenced by the Native American and by the African American. And one guy on the comments of one of these videos was talking about, well, it's such a shame that he was such a racist, because there was such wonderful African stuff going on in America, like the music. And there's a whole direct quote from Carl Jung talking about the glories of African American music. So, and it does shed light on another problem that you have, is that you don't absorb and relate the truths. You absorb and relate what you need to believe. And these people obviously need to believe, probably as in a way of, by way of discounting Jung altogether, which would definitely, because he's very, in application, he makes a mockery of monotheistic, particularly Judeo-Christian culture. No, he doesn't say nasty things about them, but he doesn't, he finds a higher order of being than they present to us. So there are many millions of reasons why Carl Jung would be, why this civilization, especially its intellectuals, would not be fond of him. Apparently he hated philosophers, and that's another discussion that they're having, and they're having that discussion from the point of view that they're all very pro philosophers, and philosophers are just a fucking bore, especially post Christ. There's really no point, because there's a guy in the sky who decides everything.